All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kabbalah Café. So today we are back after Passover. Hope everyone had a wonderful Passover break. So we find ourselves in the time period called Sfirat HaOmer. Now, Sfirat HaOmer means literally the counting of the Omer. What is the counting of the Omer? So we know that historically, from the second day of Passover, they brought an offering. Well, the second day of Passover, they brought an offering called the Omer. And it was a barley offering in the temple. And from that day on, they would count 49 days. And when they got to day 50, they didn't count day 50, but they counted 49 days. The 50th day is the holiday Shavuot. The festival of Shavuot takes place exactly 50 days after Passover, after the beginning of Passover. So even though we don't have a temple today, we still count the Omer. Every evening after the nightly prayers, we say a blessing and we say Hayom Yom Echad LaOmer. Today is day one. Hayom Shnei Yamim LaOmer. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, whatever we count. For those that are wondering, today is day number 14. Today is day 14. Every day that we count is associated with an energy, a sphera energy. Think about it this way. There are 10 sphirot, 3 intellectual, 7 emotional, right? We have chachma, bina, and dat, chabad, right? We have wisdom, understanding, knowledge, the 3 intellectual. And then you have 7 emotional, chesed, love, gvura, restraint, tiferet, harmony or compassion, netzach, ambition, hod, humility, yesod, communication or communication, bonding, and then malchut, which is leadership. 7 emotional traits. Each one of the 7 is comprised of the other 7. In other words, there are shades of each of the 7 within each of the 7. 7 times 7 is, 49. You guessed it, 49. Unbelievable how the math works out, right? 7 times 7 is 49, which means that each day of the Omer, each day of the counting of the Omer, i.e., each day between the holiday of Passover and the holiday of Shavuot, which, as I failed to mention earlier, celebrates the anniversary of the revelation at Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah, the 10 Commandments. So between Passover and the anniversary of Sinai are 49 days which we count and we think about the energy of the day. So today is, for example, Malchut Shebegvura. It's the Malchut within Gvura. What does that mean? What do we do today?
Leadership within judgment.
Leadership within discipline. So it's about thinking about how to be a good leader, you got to have discipline, right? It's how discipline relates to leadership, or how leadership relates to discipline. Discipline can take on many different forms. You can have discipline for the sake of love in a relationship. You can have discipline for the sake of giving. Discipline for the sake of discipline. You got to be disciplined in your discipline. You ever have undisciplined discipline? Oh, it's all over the place. But discipline vis-a-vis leadership, that's today's energy. This is just an example. So we live in highly, I would say, personal times. This time of year in the Jewish calendar is a time of heightened personal reflection and inner character work based on the Sphero chart. So always, throughout the year, we're meant to work on ourselves, but we have different benchmarks. We have a high holiday season, which is one type of, inner work. We have, other festivals that are all about other sorts of energies. But this time of year, it's really about the internal work. What I want to do today is talk about that which is completely beyond the Sphirot chart and energies. Now, but I want to take a half a step back. I mentioned before that this time of year, we count the Omer, and it's called Sfirat HaOmer. Now, you might hear that word Sfirat HaOmer and think, oh, Sfirot. It's two different words. Sfirat means counting. Sfirot are the Sfirot that we talk about. However, Kabbalah says that the two are connected. The word Sfirah, which we know are the energies, Sfirah, the divine energies, and also the internal energies. Why are they called Sfirah? Sfirah means, Lispar means to count. Sapir means to shine. So it has a connotation of counting and shining. And the idea is that as we count, we make things shine. We illuminate our own internal lives. When you count something, you take note of it. The things that you care about, you count. Did you ever have a collection as a kid of something? Baseball cards, bottle caps, stamps, butterflies. No one has butterfly collection, whatever, right? People have a butterfly collection, right? Insect collection, right?
Used to be butterfly and they had that little pamphlet.
Right. It came to my brain, and then I'm like, immediately, I'm like, is that even a thing, or is that a fake thing? That's a thing, right? So when you have something that you care about, you pull it out and you look at it and you note it and you count it, right? And the same thing is true with ourselves. It's about taking note of ourselves and looking internally and looking inside and paying attention to count, to polish, and to make ourselves shine. Today, I want to go beyond the Sfirot. Sfirot are the mechanism, it's the way that God creates the world. But let's talk about what exists, or the reality before creation. That's what we're going to talk about today. So Kabbalah describes, there are many different ways to describe Kabbalah. But one of the features or functions of Kabbalah is describing the architecture of creation. Like, how did all of this come to be? Now, one thing we know that Kabbalah teaches is that before creation, the possibility of creation did not exist. Let me explain. God is not just bigger than us. God is infinite. Infinite is different than big. So, for example, let's talk about an ocean. Let's talk about the La Paz is on what? The Pacific Ocean? Okay, let's talk about the Pacific Ocean. Pacifically, okay. Right, let's talk about the Pacific Ocean. So you take the I don't know, the line about emptying an ocean with a teaspoon, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, but let's say you did that. Let's say you go to the ocean, you're by the beach, whatever, you take a teaspoon and you take some of the water out. Now ask yourself the question, what ratio, what comparison is there between the little amount of water that I have in my teaspoon and the entire ocean? You're going to say it's nothing. It's incomparable. It's like it's nothing. And yet, mathematically, it's something. Mathematically, it's something. If the ocean contains X number of gallons, liters, are we metric system? Are we not? I don't know what, right? Whatever volume of water it contains, well, you have one something of the total amount. It's not nothing, not insignificant. I mean, you might say it's insignificant, but it's not nothing. However, now that's only true because you're dealing with two finite things. You're dealing with the finite. It's for Shia. I'm not making weird expressions at you with that, don't worry. So that's true when it comes to two finite things. The ocean, even though it's big, it's finite. At the end of the day, there's only X number of gallons of water and not X plus one. It is what it is. And the teaspoon also contains a finite. So finite to finite, even if it's vast, there's still some sort of relativism, because if you took that teaspoon and you multiply it by whatever number, you will get the total volume of water in the ocean. You will eventually get there. However, when you're dealing with infinite, now it's a different ballgame. No matter how many times you multiply finite, you will never hit infinite. It's something that our brains, honestly, I can't speak for myself, that my brain, it kind of struggles with. Not really. It's not like keep me up at night, but like it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around this concept. But it's true. No matter how many times you multiply, right, you enhance finite, you will never get to infinite because it's of a completely different order and sort altogether. It's a completely different reality. It's almost like somebody says, okay, so if you add numbers together, if you keep on adding numbers, you'll get to a really big number. Like imagine the biggest number out there, but you can get there. You can just keep on adding numbers till you get to that number. But how many numbers does it take until you get an apple? I know what you're thinking. What are you talking about? That's exactly my point. No matter how many numbers you add together, you won't get an apple. Correct? Because apple is different than numbers. It's just not the same thing. I have a million numbers, but 0 apples. Because keep on adding. I'm not talking about money. Yes, you can buy apples with money. That's different, right? I'm talking about just the number itself. It's of a different sort. Infinite and finite are not in the same category. No matter how many times you multiply finite, you will never hit infinite. The reason why I'm saying this is because the one thing we know about God is that God is not finite. Now, who and what God is, do we have a personality, analysis on God? Not really. The point is not really to understand God as much as it is to understand that God is not like us. We are finite. We are constrained by the basic limitations of time and space. We are constrained by all sorts of limitations. God is not constrained by any of these limitations. God is infinite. The way we refer to infinite in Kabbalistic language is a phrase that you've all heard, Ein Sof. Ein Sof literally means without limit, limitless, i.e. infinite. We refer to God as Atzmut Ein Sof, the essence of the infinite. Sometimes we use the phrase Ar Ein Sof, the infinite light, or the light of the infinite.
And so if you translate actually like people in this day will mean does not have any end or ending. If you're saying it doesn't have any limits, it'd be more like en balot. So is there a reason why it's end sof? And they use the word sof, which is like, sof means end.
Right. Interesting. I've heard the question asked in Kabbalah, why doesn't it say Ein Lo Tchila, that God has no beginning? Why only focus on the fact that God has no end? But to me, the understanding is that by using the phrase Ein Sof, no end, it means that there's no box that God fits in, basically. It's endless.
Fits with the word infinite. Because
right.
When you're actually counting and you get to something, it's like there is no end sof.
Right.
You use that.
But what I think is important, right? What I think is important is that the real understanding of infinite is that let's start with the premise of numbers, is that infinite is not just the biggest number ever. It's not a number, right? Infinite is not a number. If it were a number, it wouldn't be infinite. So even though we use infinite or infinity in the context of numbers, it's almost like a non-number number. Because if it were a number, then it wouldn't be infinite. It's almost like the anti-number number, but it's not a number. So when we refer to God as infinite, what we're really saying is that God is completely beyond any and all parameters, doesn't have any end, doesn't have any limitations, any finite elements to it, which therefore leads the Kabbalists to describe the following conundrum. It says, before God created the world, it was just God. Well, in the language of Kabbalah, it was Hu Ushmo Bilvad. It was He. God is not a gender, but it was God. And his name, Shmo, name, alone. Just He and his name. What does that mean, He and his name? So the way the Kabbalists explain is God, a name is kind of like your expression. So it's God and his light. So God himself and his infinite light. That's all there was. And the way the Kabbalists further describe this situation, this is before creation, is that the infinity of God precludes the possibility for there to be finite creation. You cannot have anything else in the space of infinite divine expression or expansion, which means, quite simply, this is something that we've definitely touched on before in other contexts. If God is taking up all the space of space and beyond, well, then there's no space for anything else to exist, right? God is taking up literally all the space, infinite expansion with no end, meaning there's no space for anything else to exist. Literally, there's no space for otherness to emerge and to exist in. Yeah.
At that period of time, did God created already the angels, or at that point where you're talking, there was no angels?
No, nothing. Nothing else. Just God.
Were angels created at the same time that God created the universe? Or
It seems like angels emerge with the decision, the desire to create, because it does say that God consults with the angels and various things, but that's already kind of in the modality of creation, as God has put on the hat of creator and has already kind of created the tzimtzum, which we'll speak about in a second. So that's already a much later stage. Again, later, I don't necessarily mean timeline, because God is beyond time also, but it's not at this point of what we're speaking of. Angels come later. In the beginning, though, before the beginning, it's only God, but God in his infinite state. And that precludes anything else to be, which leads to the necessity of the word that I just used, which is a word that we've used many times before, which is the idea of tzimtzum. Now, what is tzimtzum? Tzimtzum means, at the core, it means contraction. Tzimtzum, the most basic definition or translation of tzimtzum is contraction. What does it mean? What does contraction mean? Very simple. If you have something large that takes up a lot of space and you contract it, guess what? You've now freed up some other space. That's great, right? Imagine you have something that fills all the space and then it contracts. Great, we have all this extra room. If you want to come on in, we got room for you. Imagine you have, use a very simple analogy, a very crude and imperfect analogy. Imagine you have a subway car, right? Or a MARTA, whatever it is, what do they call cars? Car, train, whatever, car. And the door's open and it's full. You can't get on. If everybody contracts together, if everyone kind of squeezes together, you've now freed up some space. When everyone's expanded, there's no space. When everyone contracts a little bit, now there's space. This is one of my favorite interpretations. Hey, Sentry, good to see you. This is one of my favorite understandings of a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that I love. So listen to this. Good to see you. Hope your Pesach was amazing. Nice. So in the fifth chapter, so just to explain, Pirkei Avot is ethics of the fathers, and there is a custom that also this time of year between Passover and Shavuot, like we count the Omer, which I mentioned, every Shabbat, every Saturday afternoon, we study one chapter of ethics of the fathers. It's basically a section of the Mishnah that deals with ethical, with human ethics, Jewish ethics, telling us not what the law is, but how to be a mensch. Not just don't cheat someone, but smile at every person. Greet every person, the sever panim yafot, with a nice and healthy countenance. So that's kind of along the lines of Pirkei Avot. One of the things that it says in Pirkei Avot is it talks about the miracles that would take place in the Holy Temple of old, in the Beit HaMikdash. And it says that every day in the temple, if you were to walk into the Holy Temple, you would observe 10 miracles on a daily basis. It was a space that when you walked in, you were transported to a different, a miraculous world. One of the miracles is Omdim Tzfufim Umishtachavim Revachim. They would stand packed together, but when they bowed down, there was plenty of space. What does that mean? There were certain points, certain times a year at certain services, like, for example, Yom Kippur, when everybody was gathered together for the service, and the high priest would say God's name, everybody would bow down. And it says the Mishnah, that was a miracle, because when they were standing, they were so packed together they couldn't move. And yet when it came down to bow, which takes more space, by the way, plenty of space. I once heard a beautiful Hasidic interpretation. You know what it means? It means if you're standing up, there's no space. When you're willing to bow down, when you're willing to put yourself down a little bit, suddenly space opens up. You with me on the idea?
Mhm.
If you're standing up, if you're rigid, there's no space. If you're a little bit flexible, meaning you're a little bit giving, acquiescing, suddenly, miraculously, lots of space opens up, right? It's got to be my way. It can't be any other way. Then there's no space. When you
Remove the ego a
yeah,
little bit.
when you're able, what does it mean to bow down? It means you take your head and you put it down by your feet, meaning surrender the ego. Suddenly, tons of space opens up. Again, I'm not taking away from the miracle, but I'm explaining it kind of psychologically how it works. So the idea is like this. God takes up all the space. I'm going to do it in 30 seconds. God takes up all the space. But like the subway car, like the bowing down, when you contract a little bit, when you surrender a little bit, suddenly space opens up. That is the mystery of Tzimtzum. Yes.
Why, but would creation be an example of that? From nothingness, from, the infinity,
Yes.
together, I'm saying.
Yes. That's exactly the context. Yes. That's exactly the context that we're going to use it today. Good, excellent. So before creation, so let's get back on topic to the creation context. So before creation, it's just God. And when I say just God, I'm not minimizing it, but it's God, and God, there can't be anything else. God takes up all the space. When God desires to create, it comes along with Tzimtzum. God knows. I mean, it's not even like they don't require like a whiteboard to figure this out. If you're going to create, then you need to contract yourself. You got to contract. This is true in life on every level. You want to make room for someone else, you got to contract on every level, emotionally, psychologically, physically. You got to make room in a closet for someone else's stuff. That's the way it is. You got to contract. You got to make space. That's a big buzzword in 2025. Make space for someone else. Making space. What does it mean to make space? To make space means little tzimtzum, a little self-tzimtzum, a little, I can't take up all the, if I take up all the space, then there's no room left for anyone else or anything else. When God is in his infinite state, the state of Ein Sof, there's no room for anything else to exist. Creation can't exist. You and I can't exist because God is taking up literally all of the space. So the first thing that happens is tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is contraction, where God, instead of taking up all the space, now takes up only some of the space. And now there's room for otherness to emerge and exist. Make sense? Yeah.
But since there is no otherness other than God, it's just part of God is contracted, part of God stays.
Well, now you're getting to higher. Okay, hold on. Don't confuse it yet. Let me confuse it soon. No, you're right. But let's go through this step by step. On a basic level, God is taking up all the space. Therefore, you need some contraction to allow space for otherness to emerge. And again, it's true in every relationship, in every human activity. It's true you find tzimtzum in many different areas, even in the realm of communicating. You have all these ideas in your head, but to communicate, you have to have a tzimtzum to create space to think about how someone else is thinking. Because you might think about it in your way, but that's not giving room to think about it the way the other person thinks about it. And you can't communicate if it's only on your level. If you're communicating only from your head, then you're not really having a conversation. You're just throwing something at someone else. To really to educate, for a teacher to educate to a student, you have to really get down to the mind of the student. You have to understand how the student thinks. Like the example I always give, if Einstein were to teach 5th grade science and teach on his level, they're not going to understand the thing. He has to invest his mind in the mind of the student. How does a 5th grader think? And you know what that requires? Step one is letting
Contraction.
go of the way you think. You
Yeah.
gotta surrender. You gotta surrender. You gotta surrender and make space. You gotta create that opening for someone else's mind. So that's all symptom. All of that is different forms of contraction. So let's get back to our divine creation narrative. So God takes up all the space. God is Ein Sof. God fills all space all the time. There's no possibility for anything else to exist. And then at a certain point, God decides, well, I want something else. Now, why does God decide that? It's probably beyond our ability to understand. We have theories, but will we ever know? Probably not. So God decides, I want to create. So what does God do? God contracts. And that creates space for otherness to emerge. That creates space for finite existence to come up. And the one thing we know about finite existence, the one thing we should know about finite existence is the only way it exists is alongside God contracting himself. In other words, by definition, the God that is apparent or present or relevant in a world of creation of otherness is not the same God as before. And I don't mean there are multiple gods, but he must not the same energy as before. Are you with me on this? In other words, if God were to be in that infinite expansive state, that would once again obliterate all of existence, correct? You with me? God has to remain in that contracted, constricted space for everything else to still exist, correct? And let me rewind that to make sure everyone's got it. In order for creation otherness to emerge, God has to contract. But that would imply that for otherness to continue to exist, God has to remain in a state of contraction. Because the moment you were to open up that dam and God were to revert back to that infinite expansion, well, then guess what? There's now, once again, there's no room for anything else to exist, and everything else, poof. Correct? Correct. That's what it means when we say that in our reality, we don't see God, right? We don't see it. You don't walk outside and it's not like we see God literally. Now we have faith, we believe, we see signs of God, etc. But to see God in his infinite expression, infinite expansion, we don't see it on that level. Why? If we did, we wouldn't exist. Why wouldn't we exist? Because you can't have infinite and finite in the same place. It's just an impossibility. Yeah.
You're limiting God by saying that. If God wanted us to see him, what's the big deal? It's God.
I was gonna say when Mashiach comes.
Hold on. Good. So conceptually, you have twin questions, but I want to deal with Mashiach in a second, because that's actually where I was going to. To your question of can't God pull off that impossibility? The answer is yes, but this is the way it's explained in Kabbalah. In other words, you could say, who needs Kabbalah? God is infinite and the world exists. And it doesn't make sense. How could that be? God can figure it out. You could say that. But then this is so much fun. The way the mystics try to explain it in a logical way, where there's a framework that makes sense, even though it's a framework that makes sense to human minds. And one could argue, who says that God operates by the dictates of logic the way we understand it? Maybe God is infinitely still expansive and present and shining, and we still exist. Yes, but there's still something about us not being aware of that infinite expansion and expression. Because if it's only God, if we didn't sense ourselves, there's the fact that we feel ourselves, the fact that we are self-aware means already in that space of self-awareness, we don't have God awareness in the same very space. We can have alongside our self-awareness, God awareness, but it's not necessarily in this very same spot. Which means that God has allowed us space to feel ourselves and to feel that we exist, that we take up space, that we're important, as opposed to feeling only God. It's almost like Book of Tanya says, if we were aware of God's all-pervasiveness and God's infinite expansion, etc., if the eye would see that, both eyes, like the eye and the eye, right, then we wouldn't exist as a self-identifying eye. We would have there would no longer be an ego that says, I see God. We would just be melded into Creator. We would just be part of Creator. It wouldn't be I know God, or I love God, or I believe in God, or I behold God. It would be God. There wouldn't be an I anymore. The
If we
I,
saw the expansion.
if we were, but not just see, if we were fully aware, present, conscious of beholding, etc., like fully of that, then we would be that. And we would be part of that. We would be in almost God mode, not self mode. So there's a fine balance. It's a tricky balance that Tzimtzum accomplishes, like a very interesting dynamic and duality, where you have this idea of kind of contraction of God, allowing space for us. But as Yaakov pointed out, God is still here, but in a different way, at least to our perception, than the way that it was before.
Be a longer conversation. I don't want to take the whole class of that, but if you're saying that we do believe that 3,300 years ago God appeared on Mount Sinai, we're about to get there in Shavuot, then it's not an issue for God to appear in front of us, for us to be able to see Him.
But what happened when God appeared? What does the Talmud say?
We died.
We couldn't handle it.
Harcha nishmatra, we died.
Right.
And what happened?
Tried
After
again
that?
and we died again.
What happened after we died? God had to
Revive us.
resurrect us.
Then
That's
give
not a
us-
life. As I say in Yiddish, das ist nicht kein Leben. What kind of life is that? What kind of life is that? Right? Right? It's like the Jewish guy in the hospital. The doctor comes in. Are you comfortable? He's like, I make a nice living. It's a joke. It's not a life. That's not a life. To be completely obliterated out of existence and then brought back and then realize that it's only God, and then so you
But they
dissolve, and then you
recognized
come
it,
back and
they
dissolve and
asked
come back and dissolve.
Moses-
Correct.
They recognized that wasn't a life, and they said, Moses, we can't do this anymore.
Correct. And right, as the Talmud is all the Talmud of the Midrash. Either the Talmud or the Midrash says that the people said to Moses, "We got to stop this. We got to stop this. Like, we can't handle this." It's like that scene from that movie. You can't handle the truth, right? Sometimes we need a little Tzimtzum filter. You can't. The human, look,
Moses could, he was the only one.
he's the only one. Moses is Moses. That's why he's Moses. No one's like Moses. The Torah says there's never been a prophet, nor will ever be one like Moses, who spoke face to face with God. Moses, like, he's the bomb. Look, we know this. The human eye needs light. You can't see without light. But if you look straight into the sun, still, you also can't see. There's always a fine balance. You need light, but not too much light. So, oh, well, hold on. If you take, it's gross. If you take like an eye and put it right up to the sun, that's really bright, right? That's good. If light is good, more light is better. Sometimes it just can go too far. It's the way it is. Sometimes there's a line that you don't want to cross. And when it comes to divine, I don't know, revelation, divine presence, there's a reason there's a tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means almost like sunglasses, like a shade, right? Like blocking the full truth, reality, revelation of God. Because we wouldn't exist. Now, a person might say, well, maybe that's not a bad thing if we wouldn't exist. Who says we need to exist? I don't necessarily disagree. But apparently, God thought we should exist. The only way for us to exist as self-identifying, discrete, i.e., distinct creatures, not non-God, separate from God, the only way that can happen is through tzimtzum. It's the only way that happens. Because as long as God is infinitely shining, then all you have is God infinitely shining. To have something else, you need to somehow cut that. And yes, maybe the idea of contraction, constriction, like the subway car, people squeeze together, maybe that's a bit of a crude example. Meaning that's too physical. It's not like God shrinks, physically shrinks. Maybe it's more of like, tuning down, or, like if there's a lot of like the sound is too big. By the way, it's true with audio also. Crank up the volume, you're going to blow your speakers. Same thing, right? You got to sometimes cut the volume. So it's about turning the volume down. It's about turning the brightness down of the light, putting on a pair of sunglasses. Maybe God just gives us pairs of shades and says, don't take these off, right? We're working with lasers. Keep those safety goggles on you.
There's another reason that God uses human logic because if he, she, it didn't, then we wouldn't understand how to interpret any messaging or any communication from God. So, even in a dream or whatever, I mean, if something doesn't make sense, there's also a reason for that. Oh, that's not logical. That's weird. Why is that? What's the lesson there? So
very well stated.
Yeah,
the Kabbalists speak about this. Exactly what we were saying, that God does use human logic for us to be able to have a relationship. Because if it was all impossible and paradox, which a lot of it is, but if it was all that, then we don't even have a shot. Then what do we even do? Then all is impossible, nothing makes sense, and we're just here and whatever. We don't even know like how to process anything. Good, well stated. So the point is like this. The point is that before the beginning, it's just God, infinitely expansive. Then God wants to create us. And so to do that, there's a tzimtzum. God moves out of that, let's say, infinitely expansive space and into a space of concealment, tzimtzum, hiding, contraction, etc., to give us space. But I want to get to your question about Mashiach, because here's the one thing we know. Judaism believes in a destiny to the world, that this is not just, there were different theories on time and history. Many believe that time is cyclical, right? The same people, the same things happen again and again and again, and things are just a cycle. Many believe that time is linear, right? That just there's a beginning point and we just move on and move away and like whatever. We're just moving forward and that's it. Judaism believes in something more akin to a spiral, which means that we're moving forward, but we're also crossing over certain parallels to what's come before. So for example, the holidays are where we realign with energies from the past, but hopefully like a coil or a spring or a spiral in a forward moving way. So we're moving forward, but at the same time, we also kind of realign with points in our past throughout time. Make sense?
You were describe it like this, like it's a circle from last year, but we're also moving up.
We're also moving up. Yeah, either forward or up or whatever, however you want to picture it. Correct. Same thing, exactly. Passover again, but on the next level. All of that to be said, that Judaism also believes that there is a destiny. What is the destiny? Mashiach, the Messianic era. What is that? So at the core, we go by the way that the prophets describe it. It's a time when there's no peace. Sorry, not no peace. Where there's no war, there's no hunger, there's no jealousy, there's no hatred, etc. It's a time of global peace, world peace, human peace. Everyone's happy, everyone's healthy, everyone is getting along. But at the core of that is something else. V'ra'u kol basar yachdav k'pi Hashem diber, that the entire world, v'ra'u kol basar, all flesh will see that the mouth of God is speaking. Right? What's another verse that I'm thinking of? Umala haaretz de'as Hashem k'mayim le'emachasim. The world will be filled with the knowledge of God, like the waters cover the ocean bed. At the core, the Messianic era is a time of divine awareness, divine revelation, which begs the question. And in the way the Kabbalists understand it, it's a time when the essence of God, the infinite essence of God, will be finally open and revealed. Because up until now, we're always getting things through shades, we're getting things through UV protected lenses. When Mashiach comes, high definition. The question is, one second, hold on. We said up until now that a human being can't handle that. that when you have that open display of God, we can't exist. There's no us to even see God because we get obliterated. So what does it mean that in the Messianic era, we will have that experience of seeing God? How is that possible? This becomes a very complicated thing to think about. We're aiming for a time, we're working toward a time when all truth will be revealed. The truth of God's infinite nature. But in the space of God's infinite nature, how can finite existence exist? We just said that that's an impossible, the two don't go together. So the way the mystics describe, answer this conundrum is the following, is by saying that although at the beginning of time, infinite is not compatible with finite, the two are a contradiction in terms, but as time goes on, and as we do the work, avodah, the work that we need to do, we can expand our vessels, and thus, vessels meaning the kalim, our capacity, and thus ultimately be able to handle even God's infinite light, which means that one day we can take off the shades and see the infinite truth of God and still remain standing and not be obliterated.
How do we do that?
So everything in life is midah keneged midah, which means measure for measure. So if you want, so to use a very simple example, if you want tomatoes to grow, you probably should plant tomato seeds. If you plant, I don't know, grapes, does grapes have seeds? Is that what it is? Seeds? Yeah, grape seeds. Don't expect tomatoes to grow. It's not going to happen. I mean, grapes might also not grow, but you can't put one thing in and expect another thing out. So it's midah keneged midah. What you put in is what you get out. So if we want essence, core truth, then we got to put in, our work has to be core truth and essence. It can't be superficial stuff. If we're operating in a superficial way, then we're not going to get something essential. We're going to get something likewise superficial. Again, I'm going to say that again. If our work, our avodah, spiritual work, if our life work is only surface deep, it's only superficial stuff, it's only like, the outside stuff, then we're only going to get external stuff, outside stuff. But if it's deep work, then we're going to get something a little bit deeper. What does that mean for us? And this ties into our text, obviously. What it means is, like using the context of Shema, there's different levels of love of God. You can love God with all your heart. You can love God with all your soul. You can love God with all your might. And that third level, with all your might, that's the one that's the essential love. That's the deep love. What does that mean? As we've been describing this probably over the last few months, we've been touching on this core idea. I've never explained it this way. We've been touching on this core idea that there's the love that comes easy, and there's the love that comes more difficultly. Comes a little harder. There's easy love and there's hard love. The easy love is, yeah, things are good, I'm happy. The harder love is, things are not good, I need to break through to find the truth here. That's the harder piece of it. It's finding God not in the easy places, but in the hard places. This is the breakthrough. It's about finding God not in the easy spaces, but in the difficult spaces, in the hard spaces, in the dark spaces of our own character and of our own lives. In other words, in the times and the moments and the experiences where things are difficult, where things are tough, when things are not going the way we expected or want, if we can dig deep and find purpose even in that, then we are accessing a connection, a relationship with God that is not surface deep, that's going way beyond the surface. And therefore, we're accessing something of the essence, not something of the superficial. You know, we've been exploring today. I mentioned that today's energy is Malchut of Gevura. We've been contrasting the experience of a Chesed modality relationship with God with a Gevura modality relationship. A Chesed relationship with God is things are good, I'm happy, God, I love you. That's Chesed. Gevura is a little bit more complicated, a little bit more tortured. I don't mean that in a horrible way, but it's a little bit more complicated. It means God, it's like this. It's God, things are not going so well, right? Things are not going the way I want it to go. I'm feeling a little bit squeezed over here, right? Or maybe we tell ourselves, my life has not turned out the way I wanted it to be, or I'm not living, I'm not optimizing my talents, abilities, potential, whatever. And therefore, I have a sense. Is there a BMX show happening behind me? Seeing the reflections back there, huh? Do they? What could possibly go wrong, Century? Remember, it's those moments of difficulty that bring out the best. No one ever grew while lying on the beach in La Paz, Mexico. Here's the thing. When we confront the challenges in our lives, when our lives are disrupted by something that happens that we couldn't have predicted, things are moving along in a certain trajectory, and then suddenly something happens and disrupts us. And it requires us at that moment, to dig deep and to really look inside and to ask ourselves the question, well, who am I and what am I really about? What are my core values? What do I really care about? What are my priorities? We dig deep in those moments. Those are the moments in which we access essence. See, typically human beings live. We live on the surface of reality, the surface of our own reality, and therefore access the surface of divine reality. To live deeper, to access something deeper, deeper truth, typically happens through disruption, through being squeezed a little bit, through something not working out the way we want it to. It's in those moments of challenge that the greatest light can be born. And so you ask, Scott, well, how do you get there? How do you get there? How do you get to that moment? Because again, we're talking about on a historical level, we're talking about the Messianic era. On a personal level, it could be a breakthrough that happens any day. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait till, Mashiach comes. It could be any day we can experience this breakthrough. The breakthrough happens through the work of breakthrough. In other words, we're not going to get a divine breakthrough if we are not in a space of personal breakthrough. If you want a breakthrough, then you got to have a breakthrough inside as well. I can't be cruising along life, right? Laissez-faire, is that a phrase? What is that, laissez-faire? What does that mean? What does that mean?
Leave alone.
Oh, leave alone? Oh, no, that's not. It doesn't work?
That is a theory in economics. Leave it alone.
Leave it alone. All right, good. So it does work. I can't. Huh? There you go. Good times roll is a good thing. No one's anti-good times. However, but just understanding what's what. If we're living in a space of let the good times roll, that's fine. But we're living there, but then we're living in a more surface or superficial space. We're not living in a challenging, deeper, transformational place. In other words, if we want God to become uncomfortable, we have to be ready to become uncomfortable. Well, what does that make God uncomfortable? Yeah, because God right now has created a system. The system is tzimtzum. He's constricting himself. He's hiding himself. He's only letting us have a very reduced level of divine energy, divine access, right? It's almost like God leaks to us only like the smallest wavelength of divine. Now, we can be blind to that, or we can become aware of that. When we're aware of that, it means that we know about God, we believe in God, we trust in God. But again, which God? I don't mean that there's two, but whatever God has leaked us, whatever God has made accessible. But what if we want the essence? You can't have the essence, because if you have the essence, then you can't exist. Oh, so now you want something a little impossible? Great. Can you create that breakthrough inside us? Can you access something that's inaccessible? Can you bring out the impossible? Can you bring out a space within you that is so precious that is so deep, that is so vulnerable, that until now we've been afraid to bring that out within ourselves. If we can bring that out within ourselves, that triggers above the same response. It's about putting ourselves, not necessarily intentionally, but when it happens, recognizing the value of the discomfort, the value in the challenge, the value in the disruption, and then recognizing that through our work in those spaces, we call forth God also in that modality of disruption, of discomfort, and just a different reality. In other words, to reach the essence of God, we got to reach first the essence of self. And to reach the essence of self typically doesn't happen in comfortable spaces, in comfortable times. It's specifically when we're a little uncomfortable, when there's a little disruption, that's when the truth, that's when the precious core of self comes to the fore. It doesn't mean that we didn't have that within us before. Of course we had it. But the question is, were we accessing it? You don't have to access. Think about the love that you have for someone. I mean, I don't even want to okay. Let me phrase this in a different way. Think about the love that somebody might have for someone. Okay, somebody has a loved one, has, let's say, a parent or a child or whatever it is. Let's say a parent. You have a parent and you love them, but think about what happens when, if God forbid, the parent has a medical, emergency. Now think about like how present the love is, how immediate the love is. And you feel the love much stronger, like everything's so much more urgent. Well, where was that sense of love 5 minutes ago? It was there, but it wasn't called forth. The essence of the love wasn't called forth. The essence of the love comes forth so often in times of crisis. Now, we shouldn't have to wait for a crisis. We should bring it out. We should self-induce it. But it's always going to take some sort of pressure, some sort of, whether it's external or internal, some sort of mechanism to bring out the depths of what we have inside. And it's then when we bring it out that it comes out and becomes access. Now, typically the way it works in human behavior and human experiences, that it comes out and we feel it, and then it recedes back to the it goes back to the background, and it's not, we don't feel it. So we have these epiphanies in life. We have these moments of truth and clarity, and where everything, yes, it makes so much sense, and then a moment later, it's like, yeah, or maybe it's just, maybe I just need to eat lunch. Like maybe it's, whatever. That moment has passed. It takes effort to constantly, it's almost like splitting the sea, like opening up. To constantly split your own sea, it's very difficult, right? It takes effort. It takes determination. The key is that if we want God to open up, we gotta be open. And how do we get open? Sometimes, oftentimes, most times, in those moments of discomfort. It's hard to open when we're comfortable. We typically open up, and magical things happen when we're a little bit uncomfortable. And so here's really the takeaway from this. In those moments of discomfort, we have a few options. One option is to say, well, why is it uncomfortable? I don't like it being uncomfortable, and therefore, can I speak to a manager? Like, I don't like being uncomfortable. So, like, who do I need to speak to resolve the situation? Can I call customer service? Like, can we make this not uncomfortable? Another thing is to say, well, one second, it's uncomfortable. How can I grow from this? Right? What is being called from me in this situation? How can I find something deeper within myself to come out in response to what is clearly being called of me to come out? As opposed to saying, I'd rather have it comfortable and therefore just continue the way things are. The moments of discomfort, and whatever they are, they could be in every area of life, right? Health, relationships, work, family, anything, whatever it is, whatever area of life it is. Whenever there's a moment of discomfort, there's always an opportunity there for something deeper within ourselves to be called forth. but it's a response and it's a choice. I could say, let's mask it. I don't want to feel the discomfort. Let's mask it. So I'm not going to do the work. If we really want to capitalize on the opportunity, it's about digging deep inside, pulling out the potential, pulling out our potential and putting it out there. And like I said, that's how we trigger the essence. So how is it that we believe in a time when God's truth will be revealed and yet we'll still be here? It's a paradox. It's a paradox, right? The answer to the paradox is recognizing that we have the power to bring out the truth of who we are and still be who we are. In other words, to not have to hide who we are to be who we are. Because how often do we go through life hiding the full power of who we are? We hide the true identity of who we are because we go through life. We have to kind of either protect ourselves, block ourselves, or even protect ourselves from ourselves. And this idea is about becoming on full display. It's about not being afraid for the discomfort, not being afraid to dig inside, to open up. And that triggers from above the same response. And so, my friends, as we close out today's opening post-Passover session, right? I think we're officially now in the era of Moed Hatal, which is like spring, summer, 5785. So as we kick off our summer edition, when does summer begin?
June 21st.
No, it's only April. Okay, as we begin our spring, summer edition, there we go, of Kabbalah Café, let's remember the power of Gevurah, the power of the squeeze, the power of the disruption, the power of the discomfort, because it's only in the space of discomfort, it's only in the space of disruption that the truth of who we are can come out, and then we can get the truth of God also on full display, HD display in our lives. Make sense? All right. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Thank you. Okay, let me speak about this course. Can someone pass me a brochure? Thank you. I just want to quickly reference it. Okay, so just to clarify, this is a 4-session course that is starting in a week and a half, May 7th. It's Wednesday. Now, it's a daytime class and an evening class. This class, as I mentioned in the opening, will be, because I haven't yet taught it, it's a brand new course, will be one of the most fun and fast-edited classes I've ever taught. When I say fun, I literally mean fun. Lesson 1, okay, so let me just explain what this does. 12 heroes of Judaism that you've never heard of. These are 12 people that changed Jewish history or changed Jewish belief or Jewish philosophy or Jewish learning. People that were change makers that have flown under the radar, ... until now. Okay? Because as of this course, they will not be unsung heroes anymore. Lesson 1 talks about courageous converts. I'm just going to read it because it's you will not believe these stories. A Roman prince outwits his uncle to study Torah. An Italian priest studies his way to a new life. And a Polish noble meets an old Jew studying Talmud on a Paris park bench. It almost sounds like the opening line of a joke, right? But it's not. These are real stories of real heroes, and obviously with lessons for all of us to integrate. Lesson 2, influential Jews. Spain's top Torah scholar leads a Muslim army. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? An Amsterdam rabbi with a print shop talks England into readmitting Jews. That's kind of cool. You know that England banned Jews for like 400 years. Okay?
They also didn't allow Jews to go to Israel.
Interesting.
But we do care.
Apparently. And a rabbi teaches a Catholic scholar and saves Central Europe's Jewish books. Lesson 3, unsung heroines. A businesswoman saves thousands from the Inquisition and rebuilds Jewish life across the Mediterranean. And a female Torah scholar shapes halakhic discourse while raising a family, feeding students, and caring for the sick. Lesson 4, heroes and hostages. 4 rabbis are captured by 10th century pirates. Germany's foremost Jewish leaders held for ransom. And thousands of East European Jews languish in Ottoman slave markets. These are some of the stories. 11 out of 12 stories.
the class on the Wednesday night?
So Wednesday day is 12 to 1:15. Wednesday night is 7:30 to 9. So late, you're saying late?
Yeah,
Yeah.
7:30 to 9.
But it's in my opinion, I know I'm
It's
obviously
worth it.
biased. It's well worth it. This course.
And you wrote the book?
I didn't write this, but some of my good friends did. Shmuel Super and others of other colleagues wrote this course. I'm on the editorial team, but I didn't actually write this one. This is the teacher's book. There are 325 pages in here, and I gotta play this. These classes come along with historical artifacts, like original documents, original compositions. We're going to talk about, I don't want to give too much away. We're going to have some ancient, like musical, anybody into music? I know, David, you're into music. So the first Jewish sheet music is written by a fellow who converts to Judaism. I don't want to give too much of the story away. Huh? So writes the first Jewish sheet music, and we're going to have that song. We're going to play it in the class.
Oh,
He
wow.
composed it to some words for the liturgy. This is unbelievable stuff over here. That's all in lesson 1, not all, but that it will be included in lesson 1. The course is phenomenal. It is well worth your time and investment. You will learn, be thrilled, excited, astonished, and inspired from it. So that's coming up in a week and a half. What else? Today, this week is a normal week. So we have the Sunday class. We have the Monday lunch and learn for those 55 and over, 11:30 a.m. Tomorrow we have a lunch. We have the Tuesday night class. We have, the Wednesday is not starting yet. We have Thursday night Tanya. So move in because we got a lot of stuff. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for asking. Yes. I meant to clarify in person and on Zoom. Okay. So we got you coming and going. Day, night, in person, Zoom, lunch, dinner, whatever you want. All right. We got everything. We got humor. We got music. Everything. Okay.
Love that. And we get the text. Are we able to?
Yeah. So 1 second. If you join the course, you will get your own text. Yes. Yes. All right.
Not
Good.
sure I can make it physically here at 7:30 on a Wednesday.
Got it. And lunch doesn't work either, right? Daytime.
4 a.m. Like leave the house at 4 a.m. for work.
Oh,
But I don't get home until 4:30 in the evening.
So I understand that schedule.
Study. They kind of like I'm online with you, right?
But you gotta go to sleep right after. Yeah. No, 4:30 is early. Yeah.
So But this sounds amazing. So I really want to do it.
This is of all the courses, because I started preparing. I can't remember a more fun course. And it's also storytelling. I love storytelling. These are stories.
My mom tried to find and they go on.
You can always catch it after, but you can't make it live on Zoom. It's all recorded, and I send you the link out with the summary and the videos. You can always catch it. Give her in this one. But not that I want you to miss it.
I don't want to miss.
If you miss it live, you can class.
The email just in case.
I'm gonna check it right now. Dr. Max, it's great to see you. Hope you had a great Passover. Renata, hope you had a great Passover. Caroline, hey, good to see you. Hope you had a great Pesach. Anita, welcome. I think it's your first class, right? Jacqueline, Lisa, Mariana, hope you had a wonderful Passover. Good to see everybody.
Thank you,
Shavuot
Rabbi.
tov.
Yes, my first class. Thank you so much.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Anita, do you live locally here?
No, I live in Tennessee.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. How'd you find out about us?
Through other friends who live in the Atlanta area.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I'm so glad that you're here. So glad to meet you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Rabbi, it's Lisa. I have a new guy who wants to start either coming to or watching it. He just found out he's Jewish
Oh, wow.
on both sides. He's Anne Frank's cousin.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And his dad changed his name. It was Kaufman, and they changed it to Kaufman with a C. When
Okay.
they came over.
Yeah.
But so he recently found out he's Jewish on both sides. And I was telling him about Kabbalah, and I said it's Jewish light. So he thinks he wants to come and check it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Send them our way. We'll take
All
good
right.
care.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Caroline, I'm glad that it was time. I saw your note. Very good. Very good. All right. See you guys. Enjoy. Have a wonderful week, Shavuot.